Hello, everyone, and welcome to another BGA Candid Conversation, our series of discussions on important good government issues with top elected officials here in the state of Illinois. I'm Andy Shaw, President and CEO of the Better Government Association, which, as many of you know, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, full-service watchdog organization that shines a light on government and holds public officials accountable by investigating, litigating, educating, advocating, and communicating in pursuit of the better government we're entitled to in exchange for our hard-earned tax dollars. Simple as that. Our conversation today is with Dan Cronin, Chairman of the DuPage County Board and a former state senator from Elmhurst. Yes. Chairman Cronin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
I also want to thank our friends and supporters at the Inland Real Estate Group here in Oak Brook for providing us with this nice space for the conversation. So let's get going.
Yes, sir.
One of the reasons we're talking is because you've had a unique distinction for the past 3 years through your hard work among some of your former colleagues in Springfield. You were able to get authorization to do something that matters a great deal to us. We call it smart streamlining. Your new initiative's called Transform Illinois. But long story short, it gives you or gave you the power to start consolidating, combining, and eliminating unnecessary and duplicative units of government. I was reading some of the material about this, and you say 3 years later that you've been able to get rid of only 3 units of government, right, and you have the scars to show the battle scars from that fight. So just sort of explain, first of all, why did you undertake this? It's obviously important, and we think it's one of the most critical things to making government in Illinois sustainable again. We have 7,000 plus units of government in Illinois, most in the country by maybe 2,000 or 40%. The cost of that is excessive. It's one of the reasons we're one of the highest tax states in the nation. With that in mind, you decided to try to do something about it. Why? It's a tough battle, and it certainly doesn't endear you to a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about it. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, we have more government, more units of local government, as you just stated, here in Illinois than any other state in the union. And what's remarkable about it is that the number itself is an issue of debate, right? We don't know whether or not it's somewhere in the neighborhood 6,500 to 7,000, or maybe upwards to 8,500. There's not agreement.
If you count the townships as 2 separate units of government, one the township, one the highway department, as the comptroller does, you're at 8,400.
Correct.
Which means it's about 50% more than any other state.
We have a lot of government here. And the question is sort of a philosophical big picture question that I like to ask just to sort of frame the issue. You know, if you had a magic wand, if the Better Government Association had a magic wand and you could wave it over the state of Illinois and wipe the slate clean, you know, there are no more 8,400, you're starting fresh, you're starting over. It was your job to redesign local government. Would you set it up this way? I think the answer is, of course you wouldn't. You would not, because this is overlapping, it's inefficient. You've got independent silos, you've got people, you know, focused on one mission and they're not mindful of the mission next door where they could work together. I mean, it grew up over time, and it's a highly inefficient, costly structure. And so the challenge for us and the challenge for me, I think, is how do you get to that ideal model? How do you turn it around? It didn't happen overnight. How do you put structures and give tools to local government to turn this giant ship around and to try to find ways to share services, to eliminate unnecessary government, or in the case of some government, maybe consolidation is not the answer, but shared services are more accountable, more transparent. There's a lot to it.
You were given the authority initially. It was limited. You were given authority to go after, or at least look at, 13 units of government. Here we are 3 years later, and some might say, boy, not a lot of progress in 3 years, only 3. You could argue not insignificant, but you have a sanitary district that you got rid of. You got the state to help you get rid of a second layer of your fair authority.
Correct.
And the third is
Fairview Fire Protection District.
Yeah, a fire protection district.
Right.
And you mentioned scars. What's made it so difficult?
You know, there's folks that are very protective. Look, if you go back a few years, I kind of got involved into it because there was sort of a scandal here in DuPage County. The DuPage Water Commission had misspent or couldn't account for some $69 million. And so I was very troubled by that as a legislator, proposed some legislation at that time, and ran into some really strong opposition from both sides of the aisle. And then when I was on the job, I ran for the county board chairman in 2010. I was on the job for about 2 weeks, and I got a letter from the chairman of the Housing and Urban Development Director in Chicago informing me that the DuPage Housing Authority had misspent some $7, $8, maybe $9 million in housing vouchers. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, it got to the point where I couldn't sleep at night because as county board chairman, I have this responsibility to appoint people to some 52 different boards and commissions, 24 of which have independent tax levy. So the only connection between the taxpayers and the conduct of these 24 different agencies that have taxing authority is the appointing authority. And so I felt an awesome responsibility.
Is that with the approval of your board or just you unilaterally?
Over time, yeah, some are with the approval of the board, some are unilaterally.
Okay.
You know, it's grown up over a period of time. You know, I mean, we really discovered some really remarkable sort of self-serving provisions in the law when you go back and look at how they were rooted, how you try to turn back. And so in any event, we had these terrible experiences. I had to pass a law just to take a look at the books, to examine the books, the budgets, the procurement practices of these agencies that I appoint. I'd ask them, would you take a look? No, you're not entitled. You could FOIA them, or so I had to go pass a law to look at the books. Most of the agencies were very cooperative. Some were not, and so we got reams of paper and documents. We had to engage the services of an accounting firm to go through all of this, and we came up with a playbook at that time. We call it the Crow Report. Crow Horwath helped us with it.
Is this what led to the ACT initiative?
Yes.
Accountability, consolidation, transparency. That preceded
Correct.
the authority to downsize?
Right. So I'm going back. So I had these experiences,
right,
personal experiences, that led to my insecurity about what bomb is going to go off next. You know, I have this responsibility to appoint people, but I don't know what's going on out there. Right. These are agencies that run under the radar. They're appointed. People don't know, but they've been there. They have taxing authority. $300 million in taxing revenue, employs some 900 people. So we passed a law so that I could take a deeper dive and to look at what's going on out there in the field. Got all that information back, organized it. We came up with a game plan. We could see that there was agencies that wouldn't post agendas, that had no ethics policy. Procurement practices were very, very subjective, and there was no standards. We were really disturbed by some of the agencies that we discovered that didn't really need to exist anymore. And so we came up with a game plan about how to go about this. We came to the conclusion shortly that we didn't have the tools. We needed to pass a state law to give us that authority.
Well, let me stop you for a second, because that's maybe the critical piece in this whole state of Illinois. You can do almost nothing at the local level without state authorization.
Correct.
I mean, if I have 2 libraries in my neighborhood and I think, well, we should really only have 1, I got to ask my legislators to go down there and get authorization to study it, have a referendum, and then maybe you can get rid of one of those libraries.
Right.
You couldn't unilaterally start,
no,
hacking away at the units of government.
So
when you went back to your friend,
we went
that
back
was
to
where your
the
state
colleagues.
senator
Right.
tenure really paid off.
Right, it did, and they entrusted DuPage County and myself with this unprecedented authority to actually dissolve 13 units. Now, 13 only within my purview. These are appointed agencies, but they're 13.
13 out of how many units in DuPage?
Well, there's about 400 taxing authorities.
So they gave you a chance to take some baby steps.
Correct.
And you began to.
Yes.
And tell me, so you had one might say, well, how come 13 aren't gone today?
Well, we're working at it, but not every agency needs to go away. I mean, so the one thing I know about this, and I share with others who may be interested, it's really, really hard work. It's not glamorous. It's tedious. It's detail-oriented. You have to evaluate what is the service that they provide. Is it necessary? If it's necessary, can somebody else provide it more efficiently? If so, how do you take that structure, that tax levy, those people that are working there, how do you dissolve it? How do you transition into this new service provider? firefighter. It's not sexy, but it can only be done on the local level. When we were able to dissolve the Fairview Fire Protection District, we actually went door to door to reassure people and say, look, your fire service is not going to diminish. You're not going to be here with your house on fire waiting for a fire engine to arrive. Let me show you what we have proposed and why this is a better model.
Did you have to do it by referendum?
In the law, there is a backdoor referendum. So it's all about due process. That's probably the biggest obstacle in Springfield right now. A lot of the folks who don't want to vote for consolidation, who want to preserve all these units, who are, have some connection with township government and fire districts, and so they say, Cronin, you can't do it. We need to have a referendum. Because that's most people would agree that let the people decide, and that's very virtuous. It's all about due process, right? So in Springfield they pass legislation, bills every day. They don't put those bills out to referendum. They don't ask the voters every time they have to vote on a bill down there, should we vote yes or no on this? So we have elected representatives at the county level who can evaluate due process, who can participate in due process. We have hearings. We have a waiting period. We have to propose a service that would replace the old service and be more efficient and save money. And then even then, after all of that, if people are not happy, they can petition and they can have a referendum. So it's all about due process. If we had, with all due respect, and I believe in referendum, I think it's a very powerful tool, frankly, to dissolve some of these units that we're talking about. But in some cases, the legislature and some folks down there are very diabolical. They can use referendum as a tool to beat back reform. If they want to talk about referendum, let's lower the barriers to some of these citizen initiatives, and let's talk about referendum as a tool to really and truly reform state government.
I think it's important to let people do it at the local level. A lot of folks don't understand a group like the Better Government Association, the last thing we want is for the state to decide which of the 7,000 units stay and go. It's not or what they should do, and what they're in the process of doing now, is something you fought for, at least argued for, is give the other 101 counties the same authority. It actually looks like this time around, there's a much healthier appetite for streamlining and consolidation this time, at least a bill that would give the other 101 counties similar authorization passed the House recently.
Yesterday.
And so given President Cullerton in the Senate, you served with him, would it be your guess that gets passed by the Senate and signed by the governor, and things could conceivably change statewide?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic. I think timing is everything. One, I think we started a movement here. I don't want to overstate our role in it, but I think it's fair to say the consolidation issue, when I proposed these bills a few years ago, I stood alone. There was nobody there. Today, there's some 22 different bills being proposed, legislators from both sides of the aisle. House Bill 4501, sponsored by Representative Yingling, it passed out of the House, overwhelmingly, and it is essentially what they say. And I approach this issue with humility. I don't want to be telling other people what to do, but they say in Springfield we are taking the DuPage model and offering it to the other 101 counties across the state.
Well, that means that they'd have a limited number that they'd be able to look at, or the model being local control? Local
control, but there are specific opportunities that they would identify for consolidation. When we came up with 13, I mean, in fairness, we had to negotiate that. There was certain, fire districts that were off bases. We just couldn't get the bill through if we included those. I mean, it didn't start at 13. It started at a much higher number.
Wasn't it twice as many initially, or close to
correct.
30?
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but just from my perch as a longtime news reporter and then as a watchdog, it seems to me that the pushback is simple. Almost everybody working in a unit of local government has a connection to a lawmaker in Springfield.
Right.
They're members of one party or the other. A lot of times they're friends, colleagues, cronies, and and they basically get a lot of cover down there
Right.
from their friends and allies, whether or not that unit of government is worth anything or necessary.
Right.
And that's really your obstacle. They're calling in major favors because their jobs and benefits are on the line.
Right, right. I mean, look, they're not evil. It's just human nature.
No, people want to keep their jobs and benefits.
Right. So, I mean, look, and in every one of these units of government typically is part of some association. They have a lobbyist, they have legal counsel, they have a whole industry that's sort of built up and established around them to preserve them, to protect them, right? So when you come along and you're just interested in the taxpayers and say, hey, do we really need this lighting district over here, or do we really need this paper fire district? There's institutional support to keep that going already there. I mean, I can't tell you the conversations that I've had with people, corner me in a hallway and they're giving me this into my chest, and usually they got their veins popping out of their neck and they feel very, very threatened. I remember early on when I was immersing myself into this issue, I got a letter from somebody at a sanitary district in DuPage County, and they wanted to convince me that they were a believable person and that I should listen to them, and they had advice for me. And the guy starts out in the letter saying, "Dear Chairman Cronin, my great-grandfather worked here at the sanitary district. My grandfather, my father, and now I do. And therefore you should listen to me." And I thought to myself, my goodness, you're kidding me. 4 generations of people worked at this local government? What is this, some sort of family business operating under the radar? I don't think this gentleman was evil. I think they just lose perspective.
And let me ask you, from the human side of me is concerned about one thing when we do this, and the reason we call it smart streamlining at the BGA is that it has to be done with sensitivity to the people involved. In other words, I could argue that Illinois could get rid of 2,000 units of government and you'd still have all the services you need, but you'd probably be throwing 10,000 people out of work, if not more. What do you do? So what happened to the people in these 3 units, and what does the plan do to at least have a sensitivity to the fact that these are jobs?
Right.
These people have families and bills to pay.
Right.
And even if they're a unit of government, you don't owe them a job.
Right.
The taxpayers don't owe them a job.
Right.
But you, as a leader, do owe them a level of sensitivity to try to make the transition as
Correct.
smooth as possible, as soft a landing as possible.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, that's a good question. That's there's some need to have some sensitivity and understanding, but look, here's the philosophy, as you well know. People are struggling. The economy has been in the doldrums. Finally we might see something happening here, but at the same time we have all this government and all these folks working. We've done our level best, and I think we've made some serious progress in reducing headcount, cutting our budget here. I don't delight in the fact that there are people that don't have a job now, but I do think that you have to look at the big picture. If we have less government, if we have lower taxes, that means we have a more robust economy. That means that there's more opportunities for everyone, not just the folks that happen to know, their father and their grandfather worked at the sanitary district. So I think you have to be mindful of the bigger picture. Yes, while you're immersed in this, we try to look for ways to transition. We try to look for ways through attrition. But at the end of the day, look, at the taxpayers and the voters elected me to do a job. It's tough. There's some people that are not happy with me. I'm proud of our record. I can look in the mirror and feel good about what we're doing. But I got my critics. There's people there that are out to get me because, we're shaking it up.
And you talk about big picture, so I want to get to some bigger picture issues involving the state of Illinois, but let's stick with DuPage for a few more minutes. What is your sense of how quickly you can do things that are taxpayer friendly and sensible with those 10 other units out there? Have you looked at them and they're going to survive because they should survive, or are some of them going to be projects moving forward?
Well, like the DuPage Water Commission, that has really turned around. I mean, they have really, they did have this problem, $69 million that was misspent. They had a quarter-cent sales tax that they would levy, and they accumulated all this money. They had debt. They had, all sorts of issues. Under new leadership, we reappointed the whole board. Jim Zay has been the chairman there. They've turned this thing around. They've eliminated their debt. The quarter-cent sales tax, it goes away, I think, this July. it goes away. I mean, when's the last time you ever saw a unit of government actually get rid of a tax?
Cook County tried it temporarily, you'll recall,
Yeah,
and then President Preckwinkle, your counterpart, of course, had a change of heart and mind, and we're paying it again.
Right,
We're
right.
paying half it back again, I think, or maybe
Right,
the whole thing.
right.
But in any event, it is rare. Of course, the state got rid of that temporary, quote-unquote, temporary income tax, and they're paying a certain financial price for that.
My point is that you got the Water Commission. The other one is the Airport Authority. I mean, Dan Goodwin led the Airport Authority there, took major piece of that off the tax
For
rolls,
those who don't
turned
know,
it around.
Dan is the chairman of Inland,
Yes.
where we're sitting today, and also we're happy to say that he's a member of the BGA board, and so he's one of DuPage's outstanding philanthropic business and civic leaders.
It comes down to leadership. If you have good, smart people that find ways to share services, cut costs, and look at who are, wise enough to say, look at it, if this unit of government is not necessary anymore, let's show me a
Well,
better
how could
way.
a water district not be necessary unless there's a companion one to do the
Right.
same thing? Somebody's got to manage the water.
Exactly.
But you could argue that maybe it could be managed under your administrative arm and it wouldn't need a freestanding. See, that's what I say. Mosquito abatements are one of my favorite. Cook County has 4 of them. You have several also.
45.
Oh, 45?
45 in DuPage County.
And so if I'm a mosquito in DuPage County, I'm flattered by all the attention. If I'm a taxpayer in DuPage County, I'm mad.
Of course.
I'm mad. I'm mad as a hornet, not a
Right.
mosquito. But that's absurd. I mean, in Cook County, look, this is Andy Shaw speaking. It's not a formal position of the BGA, but it seems to me that you could roll the mosquito abatement districts in Cook, which I'm familiar with, into the Cook County Department of Health and run them out of that department. You wouldn't need 4 buildings, 4 superintendents, 4 groups of trucks, 4 groups of chemicals, and multiple secretaries, clerks, and other aides. You could probably save $1 million a year. That was the estimate just from the mosquito abatement districts. Can you take after them here, or is that not part of your authority?
No, we've been immersed in it. I appoint to 3 or 4 mosquito abatement districts, but there are 45. Of the 45 different entities, the municipalities, there's mosquito abatement districts. Of these total of 45, 38 of them contract with the same provider for pesticides and larviciding, and so we've identified that one piece and said, at the very least, why don't we go to and look at a contract where we could all common platform, economies of scale. And so we have embarked on this. We've engaged the municipalities and the other mosquito abatement districts, and so we think that we're going to be able to launch that this June or July, right as we get
Will you dissolve the districts or
May.
just consolidate the
We want to start with the purchasing.
I see.
And one of the ideas that we had, and we approached the townships, here in DuPage County, we have a nice, neat grid. There's 9 townships, 3, 3, and 3. And so one of the ideas that we had was, if you could collapse 45 mosquito abatement entities into 9 townships, that would be a win, right? I mean, 9 is better than 45.
I'm shuddering at the thought of expanding the role of townships, most of which I think we could probably get rid of because they're relics of the horse and buggy era.
Well, you
Now,
would think that
less
they
so
would have
in
embraced
DuPage.
that, but they didn't even want to do that. So
Did you get authority over townships?
No.
Can you, or would you have to go back for new legislation? Does the Yingling bill, would that increase your
No,
authority?
there are a number of bills in Springfield right now that deal with townships, and we have seen some remarkable progress on this issue right in our own backyard. I joined Governor Edgar and Mayor Steve Cherico, as well as Naperville Township Assessor Rachel Osira at a press conference recently announcing their intent to dissolve the Naperville Township Highway Department and have it absorbed by the city of Naperville. Demonstrable savings, better service, no good reason not to.
No, can they do this without a referendum, or would they have to have one?
They need approval from the Township Highway Commissioner. Do you think
To get rid of his job?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think he's in favor of it?
He's in favor of it?
Do you think he's in favor of it?
If I'm a betting man, I bet against.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not a bad guy, but I mean, and actually he wouldn't lose his job. He would still maintain the responsibility to to set the levy, to oversight, some of the, conduct of the services and so on and so forth. But it's so entrenched. And there's a number of bills in Springfield right now. This is remarkable progress. The fact that there are even bills that are willing to take on this. Remarkable progress that we have leaders at the local level that are coming together on their own, proposing dissolution, a better service model. All of this comes at a time when, as we know, the state is in crisis, right? We don't have a budget. I believe that we have to adjust. There will be a new normal that will emerge. We're going to have to do more with less. And so I think one of the reasons why we're seeing some success in Springfield these days, 22 different bills being sponsored, is because people are starting to understand that if there's not going to be as much money available through the local government distributive model portion of your income tax, if with the budget prospects floundering at best, we're going to have to figure out how to give the local governments tools to do more with less.
And to your credit, you have not stopped at DuPage. You have been a leader in the push for some of these statewide bills and solutions. We're now teamed up with the Metropolitan Planning Council on this initiative that I believe came from a meeting that you called. It's called Transform Illinois. Whether it's Transform Illinois, Smart Streamlining, whatever you want to call it, that is taking on the mantle of somewhat of a statewide effort. Do you think, does that have the potential to basically move the ball forward in Springfield?
Yes.
Is this kind of collaborative approach,
yes,
which you see as the way to expand the model?
I think a big part of it is changing the culture, right? And so, when I came down with our bill to, consolidate and dissolve some units in local government in DuPage County, I was alone. And there was 167 different bill slips that were filed from groups and people opposed to us. Today, we see more support, homegrown support. People understand where we're at, but we need an organizational effort. We need somebody to stand there and to show how it can be done, to have the resources, to have the data, to shine a spotlight on somebody that's done something good, and to shine the spotlight on somebody who's resisting this change. We need that force, and working with the Better Government Association, I think that is a meaningful step in helping change the culture. Again, it didn't happen overnight where we have these 8,500 units of local government. It's not going to change overnight, but if we can put some structures in place, like Transform Illinois, if we can change certain foundational laws about referendum requirements and how to change, how do you elect people to township government? Maybe it shouldn't be a caucus. Maybe it should be a popular election and everybody in the township gets to vote on it. There are tools that we can put in place and point this ship in a little different direction, and that over time we will see more and more progress, and I think we can get back to a more sane service model for local government.
You, at the same time as you're getting authority to look at units of government that could be dissolved, you've done a number of things under that ACT, A-C-T. The
Accountability, Consolidation, Transparency.
And you claim $100 million in long-term savings, I guess. And so where does that come from? That's a significant number of dollars.
Yes.
Where do you get those kind of savings when you're only actually eliminating 3 units of government so far?
Well, again, I know that the sexy part is how many units are you going to eliminate? We talk about 6,500, 7,000, 85, whatever the number is, when is it going to be down to 6,000 or 4,000? And those are great questions, and we're working on it, and we're making some progress. But it's also, I think, fair to say that at the end of the day, it's about savings for the taxpayers. So while we didn't eliminate our juvenile detention facility necessarily, we repurposed it, and we entered into an agreement with Kane County where our juvenile offenders now go down the road, shared services, demonstrable savings, millions of dollars of savings. While we may not have eliminated our election commission, we now have consolidated all the different polling places and streamlined the way that they do business there, where we've saved some $6 million annually with those efficiencies. If we can work with our municipalities with road salt and all the different traffic control devices, we have shared services and we can demonstrate savings. Our health care, our some of the benefit packages, we eliminated this accumulation of sick and vacation days. We put a cap on that. That was a huge savings. And why does all that matter? Because we've got some real problems in the county. We've got people dying from heroin overdose. We've got an aging population, a population where poverty is becoming more and more prevalent in the county. These are where genuine services are needed. So we're not going back to the taxpayer. We haven't raised property taxes the entire time I've been here. We have a AAA bond rating, and we're able to fulfill our mission because we've found these efficiencies.
Well, that, of course, is as important as, it may be more important than eliminating units of government, because at the end of the day, it's got to be about efficiency and bang for your buck.
Yes, sir.
At what year do you actually hit the $100 million figure by your calculations?
Well, I think 20 years from the time. So yeah,
Okay.
so it was a 20
So it's
year. Yeah.
As we've discussed, it is like watching paint dry. It's incremental. It's not fun. It's not sexy. And I think if I'm alive when we actually have a sustainable number of units of government, I'll consider myself fortunate, because it is a long-term process. But it does seem to be a state. So let me ask you something. Why do you think a state that can't find a budget solution or pay its bills or get its pensions in order or basically do normal functions, why do you think that we're seeing progress in this complicated area? It would seem like this is more complicated in some ways.
Well, you point out a very interesting sort of irony, if you will. I think that's part of the reason why it is successful right now, is because they don't have a budget, because they haven't addressed the pension issue. This is interesting, challenging, and we can see that it's compelling, because all these units of local government, right? We know, just intuitively, you don't have to research it, but we have the research, it is too much, and we have the highest property taxes in the nation. So if the legislators in Springfield, if they're frustrated that they can't address the needs and the need to have a budget or pension reform, but they can do something meaningful to reduce the property tax burden on the folks back home, I think that's what's driving them, and I'm delighted. I welcome it. I'm thrilled to work with them.
Couple of referenda items that relate to this. Should we abolish the office of Lieutenant Governor? That's headed for the ballot, perhaps, if it's not crowded off by other things. Is that a sensible thing? Should we be consolidating comptroller and treasurer into one among the ways to be more sensible and reasonable?
Nothing personal about the folks that are in those offices right now, but I think yes, why not? I mean, we've seen the history of the Lieutenant Governor's office for many years. I remember Dave O'Neill actually.
He said he was bored. Or was he the one who became a radio? Somebody became a radio talk show host so they'd have something to do.
Right, yeah. And so, I guess there's a important role if the governor, something tragic were to happen. But I think in this day and age, I think to demonstrate that the state government office holders themselves are willing to embrace these kinds of things, I think is worthwhile. It's largely symbolic. I don't want to overstate it, and frankly, it's up to the folks in Springfield. It's not my call, but if you're asking me if I'm in favor of it, I think sure, yeah, why not?
And so if you're still in the state Senate as you were for a good number of years, what would your reaction be to Leslie Munger, the comptroller's announcement that you're not going to be getting your paychecks until the budget's settled, that you're going to go to the back of the unpaid bill line?
Well, I guess I actually thought somebody would propose that idea sooner. So
the first day there wasn't a budget,
right.
That's,
so
that's what her opponent, Susana Mendoza, said.
Well, I didn't mean to
it's
suggest
months
that.
late and dollars short.
I think Leslie Munger's a marvelous person, and I'm glad that she proposed that. You may recall Governor Quinn decided to stop paying legislators, and it was a case that went to the courts and so on and so forth. Look, I know they're all frustrated down there. I know that these are really, really unique times. And I have great empathy for my colleagues or counterparts down there. But yeah, the job's not getting done. So
yeah, who do you think is responsible for this budget deadlock? It's turned into kind of a trench war between the Speaker Mike Madigan and the Governor Bruce Rauner, and obviously, depending on which side of the political aisle you're on, you're more likely to feel that the other side is the wrong side. You have always been a proud Republican, so I would guess you have more sympathy
Right,
for
of
the
course
governor.
I do, yeah.
But what do you think of the way the governor's played this since he was inaugurated?
Well, I view the governor as somebody who's really passionate about, civics and getting it right. I mean, you look at his history of involvement in Chicago public schools and his philanthropy. I think he's pure of heart, and I think he genuinely believes in what he's proposing, and I think he's largely right about what he's proposing, except for how do you get there, right? And so, I think that probably his approach, maybe he'd do it differently. I don't know. The bottom line is...
Would you have taken on the unions full frontal as aggressively as he did from day one?
I've always been sort of a trade union supporter. I view them as Reagan Democrats, the pipe fitters, plumbers, carpenters, electricians. I mean, there's a lot of those folks.
Well, he's taken
living
on the
in
public employee unions, the teachers and AFSCME and those
Right,
unions.
but I think all of them have been galvanized, unfortunately. I think the governor is really trying to do what he thinks is best, and I think there's some very, very virtuous proposals there. I also know that the speaker, he really believes that what the governor is proposing really undermines a core constituency in the Democratic Party. So, it's really unfortunate. I'm an old school guy. I sort of believe in incremental reform. I believe in finding common ground. But I think with the crisis that exists here in the state of Illinois, with just such profound dysfunction, I understand why the governor came in and demanded, dramatic reform from top to bottom. And so, the speaker has been there. The speaker is smart. The speaker is committed to the constituency. I think what I would hope that they could both take a step back from what has happened in the past and maybe push the reset button. Maybe let's start over. Let's find areas where we can agree. We've got some, I think some encouraging signs. There seems to be a path to address higher ed and some of these institutions that may be closing. The monetary award program, this program that helps low-income people go to college. Oh my goodness, I mean, we can't agree on coming together and figuring out how to fund that. So I think there are some compelling issues that both sides could agree on. I think I'm hopeful. I see some progress. I believe in what the governor's trying to do, and I understand what the speaker is trying to oppose or why he's opposing it, but I do believe there's common ground and we could find a way.
Two proposals, just want to know whether you think they're good or bad. One, switch to a progressive income tax, which the way it's constituted right now, 99% of the taxpayers would presumably pay a little bit less. 1% would pay considerably more. Obviously, it's the sort of thing that a lot on the Democratic side favor. It's been roundly criticized by the governor and some of the business groups as gouging small businesses and basically giving the wealthy another invitation to leave the state. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the wrong emphasis once again. It's about more revenue. We haven't really talked about structural reform. So, I know that the governor has said that he's open to a tax increase, but it has to be coupled with structural reform, and I understand that, and I'm supportive of that approach. So while it may sound fair and reasonable to most folks, I do think that it's premature and it's about more revenue when we should be looking at structural reform.
Senator Menard's proposal to revise the school aid formula, which is much easier to pronounce than explain. Long story short, gradually shift the funding to the schools with the most poverty, the lowest scores, the most need, and make the ones with the higher property tax bases and the more local revenue, give them less. Kind of a Robin Hood philosophy, but again, attractive in some circles. Your thoughts?
That's been the policy. Title I dollars. Property-rich areas get less money on general state aid. So that's been the policy for years, just generally speaking. I think what Andy Menard is proposing is a natural extension of that, taking it to the next degree. the question is, I mean, here in DuPage County, our poverty rates are rising, and so, people may think that these are wealthy areas, and, there's a lot of school districts that are struggling to provide the services here in DuPage to the children and the families that are in need here. So, it's complicated, the school aid formula. I think everybody wants to make sure that each child has enough resource behind them that gives them an opportunity in life. Obviously, we look to education as the way to solve a lot of societal ills. I'm in favor of a robust funding mechanism, but I also think coupled with that there has to be strong accountability. There's got to be school choice. There's got to be charter schools. There has to be a robust menu of options and reforms that accompany money. And so, I'm not sure that there's been much discussion about that side of the equation. We seem to always be focused on how to drive more revenue into a system. Revenue is very, very important. It's vitally important, but if you put money into the existing structures that have low graduation rates, poor test scores, low performing student populations, we're not going to see a better result. So it has to accompany meaningful reform.
So two more questions, and I'll let you get back to work, and I'll do the same. So look into your crystal ball and tell me what the next year will bring for DuPage on the efficiency front. What will be new and interesting that taxpayers should like, or maybe there's something that they won't like that they just have to face?
Well, we've got 3 units of local government sort of targeted for dissolution, and we're doing the legwork, we're doing the research, we're talking, we've got the studies. I think there's 2 sanitary districts, one fire protection district. We've talking to another number of municipalities about sharing services. I had a conversation just recently with a fire chief who wants to take his municipal fire department and take on the responsibilities of a county.
So his neck isn't bulging and he's not pointing at your chest. He's actually wants to do something.
I'm telling you, the culture's changing. There are believers. People are coming out. They're not afraid, as they were in the past. And so I'm seeing this. So we're immersed in those conversations right here at the local level, and we will continue to see progress. Dissolving units of local government, demonstrating savings and efficiency. We'll see that. I'm confident of that. But I think there's a larger role for us to play because of what's happened in Springfield, because this notion, this idea, our experiment here in DuPage is kind of caught on. We will be engaged with our friends up in Lake County. Aaron Lawler and Melinda Bush and Pam Altoff and Jack Franks and all the folks. They're a great group of folks that are really trying to do things up in Lake County, McHenry County. So let's see what we can do to offer our support there. I want to be sort of a spectator and a cheerleader for them and let them take the lead, and I'll follow.
Well, they'll probably need some guidance as they try to replicate some of what you've done here. I mean, you have a wealth of experience and scars.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you can show them what parts of the body they'd be most likely to have scarred.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, if you have to gain trust of people, and so I think there's a responsibility that goes with this, and I'm just saying that, look, it's hard work. You have to talk to people, you have to convince them, you have to show them a better way, and then you go through the process to dissolve and to merge. I think it comes down to leadership. If there are folks, and I know that Aaron Lawler, my counterpart in Lake County, he's perfectly suited to take on this kind of responsibility, and I will see others that will step up to the plate, and this will become the new normal over time, I believe. So we'll be immersed in some opportunities here in DuPage County, and we will also be engaged with our friends in the region and across the state.
And that leads conveniently to my last question, which is maybe more characteristic of a question I would have asked you when I had my ABC7 microphone.
Yes, sir.
And that is, what's next for Dan Cronin? I mean, you took one step from the state senate to chairing the DuPage board, and you have an awfully nice platform to do something else with, because this is such an important topic and you actually have put some points on the board. So I know I'll never get the actual answer because I never have in all my years. Are you going to run for governor or something else where you can maybe have a larger footprint to do the things you think are important for a state I know you care about?
Well, I'm flattered with the question. I really, really love my job. I really,
What
honestly,
an unusual answer.
I want to be the best county board chairman there can be, and I have a great quality of life here. I'm really lucky. I live in Elmhurst, you know, in the county. My wife and my 4 children. My daughter Gracie just signed a national letter of intent. She's going to run hurdles track for University of Notre Dame, and
She's running out of state.
yeah, right. Well, you know, the Fighting Irish. It's a pretty unique opportunity. So look, this is a wonderful period of time in my life. I love the public service, but I also like the balance of my life. I'm on the team with Governor Rauner and the leaders in Springfield on both sides of the aisle. I want to be helpful and supportive, and right now, all I want to be is the chairman of the DuPage County Board.
If Governor Rauner, who by way of full disclosure was a donor to the Better Government Association before he became a candidate, at which point we were unable to take his money and unwilling to, if he were to decide it's one and done, would you take a look?
You know, you never say never, but right now I'm supporting Governor Rauner. I'm on the team.
Dan Cronin, thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Nice to talk to you.
Thank
And
you,
this,
sir.
after all the times we talked with the microphone, it's nice to sit down and do it
Yeah,
this way.
thank you.
Good luck in DuPage, and I will say, I think you deserve a lot of credit for taking on a task that every county probably ought to, and
you.
making some progress.
Thank you.
And it's like
fun.
you say, it's a great challenge. Incrementally, the day-to-day part of it must be frustrating, but when you can actually see some results, I think that's the fight for better government. So to the extent that we're both on the same page, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you all for tuning into this candid conversation. Hope you come back frequently to bettergov.org. I'm Andy Shaw, and a final thank you to our friends at the Inland Real Estate Group and the McCormick Foundation, which generously funds our civic engagement. Have a nice day.